You don't want to make an enemy out of me. And I'm looking right into the camera. And I'm gonna say it again. You do not want to make an enemy out of me.
This was Stephen A. Smith threatening Kevin Durant on live television. But Durant isn't his only victim. From attacking LeBron's son to humiliating J.R. Smith, Stephen has weaponized his platform into a career-ending machine. In this video, we're diving into how Stephen A. Smith destroys players' careers and why no one's been able to stop him. How Stephen A. Smith systematically tears down NBA players. Stephen Anthony Smith has perfected the art of bringing down NBA players through a carefully crafted system of personal attacks disguised as sports analysis. His bold commentary on ESPN's First Take and other platforms often criticizes NBA players, potentially affecting their public image. But what makes Smith so dangerous isn't just his criticism, it's his ability to turn basketball analysis into character assassination, transforming every on-court mistake into a referendum on a player's worth as a human being. The most devastating example of Smith's ability to bring down a player came during the 2018 NBA Finals when J.R. Smith made a crucial mistake in Game 1. Instead of analyzing the basketball play, Smith turned it into a personal attack that would follow Smith for years. "Stay off the weed," he joked on air, implying that Smith was intoxicated during the most important moment of his career. This wasn't sports commentary. This was a public humiliation designed to destroy a player's reputation. The damage from Smith's "stay off the weed" comment was immediate and lasting. His repeated jabs, especially after J.R. Smith's infamous 2018 Finals blunder, helped shape a damaging narrative. J.R. was cast as unreliable, unprofessional, and untrustworthy in clutch moments. But J.R. Smith's destruction was just a preview of Stephen A. Smith's true power. Take Russell Westbrook, a former MVP whose reputation Smith has methodically dismantled over the years. During Westbrook's struggles with the Lakers, Smith didn't just question his basketball fit. He questioned his character, his decision-making, and even his right to support his new coach at a press conference.
I believe if LeBron James and Anthony Davis are healthy, the Lakers could go to the playoffs with those two guys. My reservations are extremely deep about Russell Westbrook in this system.
But the most insidious part of Smith's approach is how he presents his character assassinations as tough love or necessary truth-telling. He positions himself as the only media member brave enough to tell it like it is, when in reality, he's using his platform to systematically destroy players' reputations for entertainment value.
You will no longer be allowed to sit there and say what you want. You will no longer be allowed to put out these false narratives. You will no longer be allowed to not know what you're talking about.
This quote, ironically, perfectly describes what Smith himself has been doing for years, sitting there saying what he wants, putting out false narratives, and talking about things he doesn't understand. But when other analysts called him out on it, Smith acted as if he was the victim. Consider what happened to John Wall during his struggles in Washington. Smith didn't just criticize Wall's play. He went after his work ethic, his nightclub visits, and questioned whether he deserved his massive contract. Smith has had public disputes with players like John Wall over work ethic and contract criticism. These weren't basketball takes. These were personal attacks designed to destroy Wall's reputation as a professional athlete. What makes Smith's approach particularly cruel is his timing. He has an uncanny ability to attack players at their most vulnerable moments, after injuries, during slumps, or when they're dealing with personal issues. It's as if he can smell weakness and immediately moves in for the kill.
When I say sincerely yours, the new media, you will be held accountable, and you will have to know what you're talking about in order to speak on these sports. You will have to know what you're talking about in order to speak on this game of basketball.
The irony of this statement is staggering. Smith talks about accountability and knowing what you're talking about, yet he's built his career on making inflammatory statements with little regard for accuracy or fairness. When players try to hold him accountable for his attacks, he responds with even more aggression. But perhaps the most damaging aspect of Smith's approach is how it affects young players entering the league. These are often teenagers or early 20-somethings who are suddenly thrust into the spotlight, and having someone with Smith's platform immediately begin tearing them down can be psychologically devastating. The case that best illustrates this is Smith's treatment of Bronny James, LeBron's son, who was just trying to make his way in the NBA as a late second-round pick. Instead of giving a young player space to develop, Smith made him a target for national criticism, questioning his worthiness and suggesting his father had created unrealistic expectations. Smith's attack on Bronny wasn't about basketball analysis. It was about creating controversy by targeting the son of the league's biggest star. Smith's comments questioning Bronny James's NBA worthiness led to a public confrontation with LeBron. This represented a new low, going after a teenager to generate content and controversy. The most telling aspect of Smith's character assassination approach is how he responds when players fight back. Instead of acknowledging that his criticism might have been unfair or excessive, he doubles down and often makes personal threats. When Kevin Durant had enough of Smith's criticism and called him out, Smith's response was revealing. Kevin Durant called Smith a clown in a 2020 2024 interview with The Athletic, criticizing his lack of first-hand basketball experience. Instead of defending his analysis or acknowledging Durant's point, Smith issued what amounted to a threat.
You do not want to make an enemy out of me. I'm not having it. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm not going to tolerate it.
Let me stop you there.
This response reveals everything about Smith's mindset. He doesn't see himself as a journalist or analyst. He sees himself as someone with power who can make players' lives miserable if they dare to challenge him. This is the language of a bully, not a sports commentator. When various players have faced marijuana-related charges or citations, Smith has consistently used these incidents to question their character and professionalism. Smith has commented on various players' legal issues, including marijuana-related incidents. Rather than treating these as minor legal matters, he's used them as evidence of deeper character flaws. Social media and fan discussions indicate Smith's critiques may unfairly target certain players, though this is debated and not universally accepted. The fact that there's even a debate about whether Smith unfairly targets players shows how far his approach has strayed from legitimate sports journalism. The most tragic aspect of Smith's approach is how it treats young men who have achieved something extraordinary, making it to the NBA, as targets for destruction rather than subjects worthy of respect and fair coverage. These players have worked their entire lives to reach the highest level of their sport, yet Smith treats them as content to be consumed rather than human beings deserving of dignity. When Stephen A. Smith's player destruction goes personal. The nuclear moment came in 2025 when Stephen A. Smith made the most destructive decision of his career. He decided to bring down not just LeBron James, but LeBron's teenage son, Bronny. This wasn't just crossing a line. This was obliterating every boundary between sports criticism and personal attack.
What do you make of LeBron confronting you in the aftermath of that situation?
I thought it was weak. I thought it was some bullshit. But in the moment, I knew that I was listening to a father.
This quote reveals Smith's complete lack of empathy and understanding. Even when acknowledging that he was dealing with a father protecting his child, Smith still characterized LeBron's response as weak and bullshit. This is the mindset of someone who sees family relationships as weakness to be exploited rather than something to be respected. The systematic destruction of Bronny James began with Smith questioning whether the young player deserved his roster spot on the Lakers. Smith's comments questioning Bronny James's NBA worthiness led to a public confrontation with LeBron. But this wasn't basketball analysis. This was a deliberate attempt to undermine a teenager's confidence and professional standing by suggesting he didn't belong in the league. What makes Smith's attack on Bronny particularly cruel is the context. Bronny had already overcome a life-threatening cardiac event, worked his way back to basketball, and earned his spot through the draft process. Instead of celebrating a young man's perseverance and achievement, Smith used his platform to tear him down and question his worthiness.
So I remember during a timeout in the first quarter, seeing Bronny. And Bronny looked over at me, and he had this sad look on his face. And I'm imagining Pop saw that shit. It hit him, and he couldn't hold it, and he rolled up.
This description from Smith himself is perhaps the most damning evidence of his character. He admits that he saw his comments affecting a teenager. He saw the pain on Bronny's face, and yet he continued his attacks. This isn't journalism, this is sadism. Smith knew he was hurting a young person and chose to continue anyway. The confrontation that followed was inevitable. LeBron James, one of the most media-savvy and controlled athletes in history, was pushed to a breaking point that few have ever witnessed. During a Lakers versus Knicks game, LeBron confronted Smith courtside, saying, "Keep my son out of this self, bro."
Apparently, LeBron had walked out of the timeout, and I turned around, and he's right here in my face. He said, "Yo, you gotta stop talking shit about my son. You gotta stop fucking with my son. That's my son. That's my son."
Think about what it takes to push LeBron James, a man who has navigated 2 decades of media scrutiny with remarkable composure, to lose control and confront a media member during a game. This wasn't about basketball criticism or professional disagreement. This was a father who had reached his breaking point watching someone systematically attack his child. But Smith's response to this father's pain revealed the depths of his cruelty. Instead of showing any remorse or understanding, he doubled down on his attacks and began what can only be described as a campaign to destroy LeBron James personally and professionally. The escalation was swift and vicious. Smith began attacking LeBron for missing important events, making claims about his character, and even issuing physical threats. Smith claimed he'd swing on LeBron if touched. This wasn't sports commentary. This was a middle-aged media personality threatening violence against one of the world's most famous athletes because that athlete had defended his son.
And I don't want to do that because they on the come up. I'm not covering college, I'm covering pro.
And they kids.
Huh? And they kid. Well, I'm saying, but if I was a college reporter, then I would have had to, but I wasn't. So why am I gonna be there? I didn't want to put that extra pressure.
This rambling justification shows Smith trying to defend his decision to attack Bronny while simultaneously admitting that he knew his coverage would put extra pressure on young players. He acknowledges the damage his attention can cause, yet he chose to inflict that damage anyway. LeBron's response on Pat McAfee's show was devastating and revealed just how deeply Smith's attacks had affected him. LeBron mocked Smith's physicality and media role, calling him an ice cream binging, couch-bound fanboy. This wasn't just a comeback. This was a precise surgical strike at Smith's credibility and authority. But Smith's pattern of bringing down players through personal destruction extends far beyond the LeBron situation. His relationship with Kevin Durant provides another case study in how Smith turns professional criticism into personal warfare. The Durant destruction campaign began with typical Smith tactics, questioning his leadership, criticizing his decisions, and constantly undermining his achievements. But when Durant finally had enough and fought back, Smith's response revealed the true nature of his approach to covering players. Kevin Durant called Smith a clown in a 2024 interview with The Athletic, criticizing his lack of first-hand basketball experience. Durant's criticism went to the heart of Smith's credibility problem. What gives someone who never played professional basketball the authority to constantly tear down those who have achieved the highest level of the sport?
I don't talk to Stephen A. Smith at all. Nobody in my family, my friends, they don't talk to Stephen A. Smith, so he's lying. If you ask me a question, I'll talk about them. But like I said before, I have people who I talk to about everything, and I know for a fact they didn't talk to him, so he's making up stories.
Durant's response was devastating because it attacked the foundation of Smith's credibility as a reporter. By calling out Smith's sources and questioning his access, Durant exposed the potentially fabricated nature of many of Smith's claims about player situations. Smith's response to Durant was revealing and disturbing. Instead of defending his reporting or addressing Durant's substantive criticisms, Smith issued what amounted to a threat.
You do not want to make an enemy out of me. I'm not having it. I've done nothing wrong, and I'm not going to tolerate it.
Let me stop you there.
This response perfectly encapsulates Smith's approach to bringing down players. When they challenge his authority or credibility, he doesn't engage in professional discourse. He makes threats and promises to use his platform to make their lives miserable. The Ja Morant situation provides another example of how Smith's player destruction campaigns operate. When Smith made comments about Memphis being unsafe for NBA players, he wasn't just criticizing the city. He was attempting to undermine an entire franchise and its star player. In June 2025, Smith claimed Memphis is unsafe for NBA players, drawing backlash from Morant. This wasn't basketball analysis. It was an attack on a player's home, his community, and by extension, his choice to stay with his team.
It's about your availability and how much you also want to be here, because Memphis ain't the ideal spot.
Notice how Smith frames his attack. It's not just about basketball fit or team construction. He's questioning whether Memphis is an ideal spot, essentially arguing that Morant should want to leave his home city because Smith deems it inadequate. The psychological warfare aspect of Smith's approach becomes clear when you consider how these attacks affect players' relationships with their fans, their communities, and their sense of belonging. When a major media figure consistently undermines a player's connection to their city or team, it can create doubt and insecurity that goes far beyond basketball.
Cover it. What I mean by that is that you can give your opinion. You might not be on the phone with the commissioner. You might not be on the phone with the executive VP. You might not be on the phone with other people that work in these offices. I am.
This quote reveals Smith's fundamental misunderstanding of his role and his inflated sense of his own importance. He sees himself not as a journalist covering the league, but as someone with power and influence who can shape outcomes. This isn't reporting, it's manipulation. The most disturbing aspect of Smith's personal destruction campaigns is how they affect young players' mental health and development. When you're dealing with the pressure of performing at the highest level of professional sports, having someone with Smith's platform constantly attacking your character, questioning your worth, and undermining your confidence can be devastating.
If you get to this point, you need to stop right now, because it's coming. It's coming. That, to me, is where I reach back and I pay back by giving cats the heads up of the minefield, because I've been here for 30 years.
Smith positions himself as someone who's warning players about minefield, but in reality, he is the minefield. He's the danger that young players need to navigate, the threat to their mental health and professional standing that they have to worry about as they try to build their careers. Players become guarded and defensive in media interactions, knowing that any mistake or vulnerability might be weaponized against them. This creates an adversarial relationship between athletes and media that serves no one's interests except those who profit from manufactured controversy.
I don't get paid to talk to you. I get paid to talk about you. I don't have to look at you.
Man.
But But, Rashad, I still go to the games.
Yeah.
I still make sure they have access to me. I haven't changed my number in 23 years for the sole express purpose of making sure you can fight.
This quote perfectly captures Smith's dehumanizing approach to covering players. He sees them not as people deserving of respect and fair treatment, but as content to be consumed and discussed. The fact that he brags about his accessibility while simultaneously using his platform to destroy players' reputations shows a complete disconnect from basic professional ethics. How NBA players are finally destroying Stephen A. Smith's credibility. After years of watching Stephen A. Smith systematically tear down player after player, using his ESPN platform as a weapon of mass destruction against NBA careers and reputations, something unprecedented happened. The players stopped accepting it. The revolution began with a moment that perfectly exposed the hollow foundation of Smith's player destruction machine. When Smith made yet another manufactured controversy about Russell Westbrook's presence at a Lakers press conference, former NBA players J.J. Redick and C.J. McCollum didn't just disagree, they surgically dismantled his entire argument on live television.
So you said a random take, and then you explained a bunch of things about Russell Westbrook that had nothing to do with that take, and so I want clarification.
Redick forced Smith to explain the logic behind his attack, revealing how manufactured and baseless his controversy really was. When Smith couldn't provide a coherent explanation for why Westbrook's presence at a press conference was problematic, his entire approach was exposed as empty content creation.
What is your issue with Russell Westbrook being at that news conference?
That's a wild thing. That's a wild thing for you to say. Him supporting his team, his organization, his coach, a fellow African-American man that gets hired by the Los Angeles Lakers.
Don't go there.
McCollum's response was devastating because it revealed the absurdity of Smith's position. Here was Smith criticizing a player for supporting his team and coach, exactly the kind of behavior that should be praised rather than attacked. The moment exposed Smith's approach as fundamentally backwards and destructive.
You will no longer be allowed to sit there and say what you want. You will no longer be allowed to put out these false narratives. You will no longer be allowed to not know what you're talking about.
The basketball community's response was immediate and overwhelming. Kevin Durant, forward for the Brooklyn Nets, celebrated this pushback, noting how Smith dropped Max Kellerman just for him to get dunked on by NBA players daily for ratings. Even players who had never publicly criticized Smith before were celebrating this moment of accountability. But this was just the beginning of Smith's downfall. The LeBron James confrontation represented something even more significant. The moment when Smith's attacks became so personal and so destructive that they provoked a response from the most media-savvy athlete in history. The image of LeBron confronting Smith courtside became iconic, not because it showed LeBron losing his composure, but because it showed a father who had been pushed beyond his breaking point by someone systematically attacking his child. During a Lakers versus Knicks game, LeBron confronted Smith courtside, saying, "Keep my son out of this, sis, bro." Smith's own description of this moment is damning. He admits he saw the pain his attacks were causing a teenager, yet he characterized the father's response as weak and bullshit. This revealed Smith's complete lack of empathy and exposed his cruelty for the world to see. LeBron's response on Pat McAfee's show was a precision strike that destroyed Smith's credibility more effectively than any media criticism ever could. LeBron mocked Smith's physicality and media role, calling him an ice cream binging, couch-bound fanboy. This wasn't just an insult, it was a surgical dismantling of Smith's authority. By pointing out Smith's physical condition and lack of basketball experience, LeBron highlighted the absurdity of someone in Smith's position constantly tearing down elite athletes. The image of Smith threatening to fight one of the world's greatest athletes became a laughingstock rather than a show of strength. Kevin Durant's approach to destroying Smith's credibility was even more methodical. Instead of engaging in personal attacks, Durant went straight to the foundation of Smith's authority as a media figure. Kevin Durant called Smith a clown in a 2024 interview with The Athletic, criticizing his lack of first-hand basketball experience. But more importantly, Durant questioned Smith's sources and credibility as a reporter. Smith's response to Durant revealed just how rattled he was by having his authority challenged so directly. Instead of defending his reporting or providing evidence of his sources, Smith resorted to threats. But perhaps the most devastating blow to Smith's credibility came during the 2025 NBA Finals, when he was caught playing solitaire on his phone during Game 4. Smith was caught playing solitaire during Game 4, mocked by Durant, adding to public remarks and perceived unprofessionalism. This moment crystallized everything wrong with Smith's approach to covering basketball. Here was the NBA's most vocal critic, someone who regularly questioned players' dedication and professionalism, unprofessionalism completely checked out during one of the most important games of the season. The hypocrisy was so blatant that it became impossible to ignore. Kevin Durant's response to this incident was perfect. Instead of engaging in another war of words, he simply mocked Smith on social media, letting the image speak for itself. This represented the evolution of how players were dealing with Smith: less engagement with his manufactured controversies, more exposure of his hypocrisy and unprofessionalism. The Ja Morant situation showed how players had learned to handle Smith's attacks more strategically. When Smith claimed Memphis is unsafe for NBA players, drawing backlash from Morant's response was measured and focused on defending his city rather than engaging in personal attacks with Smith. The most significant development in this player revolution has been how it's changed public perception of Smith himself. Reddit discussions such as a February 2025 thread on our NBA Talk with over 11,000 votes suggest many fans and players perceive him as prioritizing controversy over constructive analysis. When fans themselves began recognizing that Smith's approach was more about entertainment than journalism, it fundamentally weakened his position and emboldened players to continue their pushback. The emperor had no clothes, and everyone could finally see it.
A ring is a team accomplishment. I don't know where it started. It's just it's a long conversation, especially when it comes to me individually.
LeBron's comments about ring culture represented another way players were fighting back against Smith's destructive narratives. Instead of just accepting the harmful frameworks that commentators like Smith had created, players were beginning to challenge the fundamental assumptions behind them.
You are beyond wrong, Wendy. You're not even close to being right on this one. I'm sorry. No way in hell.
Smith's response to LeBron's thoughtful analysis of ring culture showed his complete inability to engage with substantive criticism. Instead of addressing LeBron's points about the arbitrary nature of using championships to judge individual players, Smith immediately made it personal and attacked LeBron's motivations. This response perfectly encapsulated Smith's destructive approach.
If it didn't mean much or shouldn't mean much, well then, why were you so relieved to finally have him? Why did you depart Cleveland to go to Miami and join forces with Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade to get one?
Instead of engaging with the substance of LeBron's argument about harmful media narratives, he twisted it into a personal attack on LeBron's career decisions. But by this point, fans and players could see through this tactic, and Smith's credibility continued to crumble. The systematic destruction of Smith's authority reached a tipping point when even other media members began calling out his approach. His attempts to create controversy were now being met with immediate pushback from analysts who were tired of his manufactured drama.
Did you just call Jimmy Butler? You're saying he's not a superstar? I don't mean to go on a tangent here, but you're just saying he's a star?
Even Smith's attempts to downgrade accomplished players like Jimmy Butler were now being challenged in real time by other analysts who refused to let his player destruction go unchecked. The days of Smith making outrageous claims without immediate pushback were over. But perhaps the most telling sign of Smith's declining influence has been how players have begun ignoring him entirely. There are reports that NBA players might refuse to engage with him, recognizing that any interaction only feeds his content machine and gives him more ammunition for attacks.
I don't get paid to talk to you. I get paid to talk about you. I don't have to look at you.
Man.
But, Rashad, I still go to the games. Yeah. I still make sure they have access to me. I haven't changed my number in 23 years for the sole express purpose of making sure you can fight.
The most devastating aspect of Smith's downfall has been how his own behavior has exposed him as a hypocrite. While he spent years criticizing players for their dedication, professionalism, and character, his own actions have revealed him to be unprofessional, unprepared, and vindictive. Players have also begun exposing Smith's pattern of making physical threats when challenged. Smith's threats against LeBron and other players have been highlighted and mocked, showing a middle-aged media personality who resorts to playground tactics when his authority is questioned.
And let me tell you what I did. I was writing for the Philadelphia Inquirer. This is from 1993 to 2010.
Even Smith's attempts to defend his credentials by referencing his newspaper career have backfired, as players and fans have pointed out that his print journalism background doesn't give him the authority to make the kinds of personal attacks he's known for on television. The most encouraging development in this player revolution has been how it's inspiring a new generation of media members to take a different approach. Former players who move into media are explicitly rejecting Smith's playbook, instead focusing on actual basketball analysis and treating current players with respect. Social media discussions reactions have highlighted how Smith's approach has been harmful to NBA discourse, with many fans expressing relief that players are finally fighting back against his destructive commentary. The financial implications of Smith's declining credibility are also becoming apparent. His recent contract extension and expansion into political commentary suggests that even ESPN recognizes that his sports commentary has reached a point of diminishing returns. The most satisfying aspect of Smith's downfall has been watching him become increasingly desperate and erratic as his influence wanes. His threats, his defensive monologues, and his attempts to pivot to politics all suggest someone who recognizes that his reign of terror over NBA players is coming to an end.
You understand what I'm saying? You ain't bullshit. And so you gonna come at from a real perspective. What happens is that if you take issue, you might call the cat out, me or somebody else, because of what we said. This is where my problem lies.
Smith's rambling attempts to justify his approach have become increasingly incoherent as players continue to expose the flaws in his methodology. The man who once seemed untouchable has been reduced to making defensive explanations that only further damage his credibility. Stephen A. Smith's reign of terror over NBA players is over. The emperor has no clothes, the wizard behind the curtain has been exposed, and the players have reclaimed their dignity and respect. What remains is a diminished figure desperately trying to maintain relevance, while the basketball world moves on without him. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.